Started a new project. I'm gonna make one of those little mini libraries that you stick out in front of your house and put books in for free or swap or whatever. Those kind of cutesy things. I'm not into this cutesy stuff, but I'm gonna try to out cutesy all the other ones in the neighborhood. Started filming late, but I have the door frame glued up, and this was just made out of door styles from doors, old doors. I used to make tons of these frames for Debbie's Art. It was all the rage. I couldn't hardly keep up, but it's not the rage anymore, and I'm kind of glad. I probably messed with too much of this lead paint already. These are some of the last few pieces I have, so I ripped it. I ripped 4 of them. They're from different doors. They're different paints. 2 2¼ just kind of an arbitrary measurement. And then I ripped back the inside to make it deeper. And I glued up the first frame, and the 4 rips I've glued together. I'm going to divide it up with mullions in the middle. Then I took some cypress and rough planed it. I'm going to glue this up to make the frame. This is perfect job for cypress. It's soft. It's really weather resistant, and it's super easy to work with, and better than I have lots of it. So this is, now we're caught up. I'm going to cut these into some shorter lengths and glue them together for the sides. This glue dries. I'm going to reinforce the corners, and I'm going to divide it up into smaller areas, and I'm going to build a carcass to fit the door. And some more of the cabinet sides over there being glued. And I have the door here because this door is going to be in the outside in the weather. It's going to need to be really strong. So what I'm going to do is cut a notch out of the inside corner at a 45, and I'll put a spline in there. I'm using my table saw sled. I have my little adapter bolted to it, and I have a fence. So I'll hold it against the fence, all 4 corners, and then I'll move the fence over a little bit and cut it again, and move the fence over a little bit and cut it again, and that'll give me, I'm going to try to remove about 3/8 of an inch of wood so I can have a good strong joint. So one of the pairs of mullions that I cut off the back side, it's the right length for the front side because it's the same thing. And I got the center mark. And if I can accurately cut that 45 with my handsaw, I'll set it in. And I think I'm just going to go with 2 pieces of glass, not 4. I think if I put this, hard to tell. I'll put 1 first, and then I may or may not put the second one. Okay, by my standards, that's a pretty dang good joint. But it is not a joint for yellow glue because I won't be able to clamp it, and the tolerances are not that precise. So this is a joint for epoxy. I'm going to put some epoxy on it, and tomorrow we'll be able to clean up this frame, and the sides should be dry enough we can start assembling something. So my little door came out pretty decent. Everything lines up. The little corners are very well braced. Sanded it, kind of rough sanded it. But I don't like it because it's square, and I don't like square doors, so I'm going to make another one. But I'll use this for something one day.
So to make my second door, I pulled out my router bit set for Cope and Styles. These things were basically built for cabinetry, which I don't do a lot of. They're built for 3/4 inch thick stock, which I'm not using in this case, and they require a lot of accuracy, which is not my strong point. But I'm going to break them out. I'm using the first bit cuts the stiles, the long joints. It plows a groove for basically for a plywood panel in a cabinet door. In my case, we're going to use glass. But because my material was thicker than 3/4, it left me two little ears on the top that I had to cut off with the table saw, and a big chunk on the bottom that I'll have to cut off with the table saw. So once you get all the long rips done, all the stiles done, then you have to carefully set the height of the machine with the opposite bit, which is the coping bit. And this is a homemade router lift that I made, and I put the lifting mechanism in the back, which is a terrible thing because every time I want to adjust it, I got to take the fence off. But I muddled through. Luckily I had made lots of scrap of material the same size, so I was able to keep playing with scraps until I got the height of the bit set. It needs to be set like exactly.
So I decided on a door size of 19 by 31. Just look right. And now things get critical. I need to cut the length of this center stile exactly right and do the joint, and that's going to establish this top and bottom can't move after that. And then I need to cut the two side I don't know, stiles, rails, put the joints on them, and then the side can't move anymore. And if I want to put the little one in here, they're going to be really critical. So here we go. I'm going to cut them to length, and then I'm going to put the router on the end. I finally got it. It took 5 or 6 tries, but I got it cutting just right. Now because I'm using that bit set on thicker wood than it was designed for, I'm going to have to trim this off and trim a little bit off of here for this joint to go together. This should be pretty easy on the table saw. I'm ready to glue up except for the glass. And I can put the glass in there and glue it up, but the problem would be if the glass ever broke, I have no way of getting the glass out. So I think what I'm going to do is rip this bottom and just glue this top half, and then I can slide the glass in from the bottom, and then I'll put a little strip of wood back later, and I'll screw it from the back, so that way if the glass ever breaks, I can unscrew that strip and get it out the bottom and do repairs. So I am ready to glue as soon as I cut that board, and yeah, looking good. So the epoxy's sets fast in Louisiana in the summer, and I did some preliminary sanding, cut the ends off, got a beautiful joint, and then I made this little piece. Okay, we left this open so we can slide the glass in the bottom. See, it's an open channel now. And then I made a piece that after the glass has been put in, you can slide this on top or underneath. Just put a couple screws in it, and they have weak joints. Any water that gets past the glass hopefully will drip out the bottom. This box really needs to be watertight because it's got books in it. Nobody wants to read a wet book. So, and I cut the bottom piece, just kind of arbitrary, 24 inches wide. And I'm going to start assembling the carcass, which should be pretty straightforward. So I started cutting out some sides and the door jambs for the front, and trying to figure out the slope for the roof. And something it just don't look right to me. So I'm gonna take it apart as well as just clamp together. I think it needs a stile under the door, which I didn't want to put because I wanted the water to be able to drop straight off the door to the ground. If I put a stile and slope it, I think we'll take care of that. So that'll raise the door a little bit. And I think the sides, these are too wide, so I'm gonna cut the bottom a little shorter so I can pull it all in. It's there's just between good proportions and not good proportions, it doesn't take much, just small corrections. So we'll take it back apart and make some corrections and put it back together and see how it does. Okay, it might be a little harder to see now, it's laying flat on the table. But I put a stile on the bottom. I have the top of it sloped 5 degrees. I have the bottom of the door sloped 5 degrees. I have the top of the door sloping 5 degrees out. And I have the bottom of the header sloping 5 degrees out. So that's going to help keep water from getting in there where the books are. And I added a big chunk on the top. Well, I haven't added it yet. It's just sitting there. But I'm pretty happy with the with this look. So I think I'm going to have to glue this together before I get any farther and have something that's fixed. And then I can sand this, clean this up, and then mount it to the base and mount the sides and start working some more on the carcass, and I'll save the roof for last. So I glued the face frame up with epoxy and set it in the sun. It dried quick. And now I'm going to cut this slope on the top and give it a light sanding, and I'm going to reinforce the joints with loose splines from the bottom and from the top. Some woodworkers, like 98% of them, put the splines in beforehand, but I'm kind of backwards. I'll put them in after the fact. Works okay for me.
Using my new plunge router for a second time, and man, nothing like a new tool with a sharp bit. This is good stuff.
Got the bottom in place and a couple of screws in it, no glue yet. Sure, I'll have to take it off. Well, I know I have to take it off again. And I got the sides in place, and I got them marked with the right slope, and I'll have to cut them to the length. And I put a little knot. I took a rabbet out of the this board in the front. It was 1.5 inches thick, but from the sides, I don't want it to look. I don't want the one in the front to be 1.5 inches and the one in the back to be 3/4. So I took a notch out of it. So from the side, you're only going to see 3/4. So I did that. So now I got to take it apart and cut those sides. This is where we are so far, and I'm about done for the day. I got the sides. I got a few screws in them. I'll have to take them out, of course, put some glue, and when I'm finished, got the door kind of halfway fit in a hole, and everything looks copacetic. And I forgot to drill. I got one of these little jigs that drills a whole bunch of holes for the shelf bracket. I should have done that before I put it in there, but the sides will probably come off again. The back will be plywood. The top's going to be copper, and over the plywood and over the sides is going to be some lap siding to make it really waterproof. So, come along. Done for the day. Okay, been making progress. Pretty well committed to the shape and the dimensions now. I'm okay with them. And I got a back put on, and I cut the sides the same width as the bottom, but I should have cut them longer so they could go around the plywood on the back, because I don't want the end grain to show. So I glued a little piece on here to I don't want end grain to show, so I glued that on there. We'll sand it flat. Nobody will ever know the difference. It's all good. So I think it's time to take it apart and sand the inside surfaces and drill all the little holes for the shelf brackets and glue it and put it together for good. Start putting the siding on the side and decide how I'm going to do the roof. I'm drilling the holes for the shelf to hold up the shelves, and certainly there won't be this many, but I might as well drill them all because I don't know where they'll be. And this little tool is worth its weight in gold. It's just a piece of plastic. But you decide where you want your first hole, and I drilled it here. And then you put the little pin in there, and it locks it into that hole. I'll tap it. And then you drill these with the drill bit that fits. And then you leapfrog it ahead and put the little pin in the last hole. This wood's so soft, it kind of tears. But it works wonderful. It's a good tool. So this morning I put everything together with screws and glue, so it is not coming apart anymore. I put this little piece here so the siding that hangs over would have some support, same as this. And I've cut these two pieces of trim, and they're going to go like yo, and that'll let the siding die into here and the siding die into here. And once I put those on, I'm free to install the siding, and I'm going to put some boards here and a ridge here to support whatever I use for a roof, which I'm not sure yet, but I know these go on, so they're free to go. Let's do that. I've got some cypress siding. It was some pretty good stuff originally. It's been out in the weather an awful long time, and I'm going to rip it down a little bit so the scale will work better. I'm going to take 1.5 inches off the bottom edge. That will remove the old nail holes also, and I'm going to put siding on 3 sides with this cypress siding, and I should have enough.
One of the reasons I started this project was because I had this copper I wanted to use. It's beautiful stuff. Recently I had some copper parapet flashing installed on my house because the old stucco was starting to fail. And the estimator came by and told me that while he was telling me his spiel, he was telling me he quoted 3 full sheets of copper. And so I said, well, if I'm paying for 3 full sheets, I want all the scraps. And sure enough, they left me all the scraps. It was quite a few. So I'm not a copper smith or a tin smith, and I don't have the really proper tools. But these little pieces are going to be so small that I think we'll muddle through okay. So I'll just have to learn some techniques, use what I have, and we're going to cut it up and hopefully not booger it up and put it together. I've ordered some copper rivets.
I played around with a couple of different ways of cutting this stuff. I even have power shears, which should be the correct way, but I found the best thing is my cutoff wheel on the grinder, but you got to keep it waxed, otherwise it just generates an incredible amount of heat.
So I'm cutting off this beautifully made hem on the side of the copper just because the scale's not right for this little box. My hem will not be anywhere near as good as theirs, but it'll be a hem, and it'll protect that sharp edge from anybody getting their fingers cut.
And it's not hot. If I wouldn't have put the wax on there, I would have just got a blister on my finger. It's amazing how much heat it generates.
So bending this copper is incredibly easy. Having the bends look good and having them where you want them to be bent, that's another issue. But bends real easy. Most of my bends were I cleaned up with a hammer and something solid. I had this stainless steel bar that came in real handy for tapping and getting the creases a little sharper. Again, this was really a job for a sheet metal brake, which I don't have, but we did the best we could.
So my first go backwards step, I cut these straight, but they can't be straight because this has a crown in it. So when I put them on here and get the crown right, I got a big old crack in the middle. So I'm gonna have to cut this again. And it looks like my crack is like an inch. I don't know, maybe an inch and a quarter. So half of that is 5/8, so I need to go from here and come back 5/8 on all of them. Okay, so the top fit's good now. I need to take care of this edge. Now the roofer dudes, they had it rolled over and then rolled over again and then kicked out. I think if I just fold it over once and then kick it out, I'm gonna call that good. I need it to, because that edge is super sharp, so you need to hide it, and it makes the edge stiffer when you, the more kinks you put in it. So I'm not sure what I'm gonna do here. I kind of like to have an overlap, but if I put an edge on it, that's gonna be pretty tough. I guess I can cut it later. Go ahead and put the edge on it and cut it later. Let's see what we can do. My first step in bending this edge over is to clamp it tight to the table. I'm going to have just enough hanging down to make that little pleat or whatever it's called.
Certainly don't intend for this to be a how-to video on how to work sheet metal, because I'm sure I'm doing everything wrong. I'm just kind of trying to show, one, what I did, and two, put your mind to it, you can make things happen.
Step 2, I got it clamped with the tail end of an angle, and I'm bending it around that angle best I can. The last step is pretty much the same setup. I just have it overhanging the table a little bit and put that little kick out on it. So one of the scraps they left had this hem, and I'm going to use this to put the top together. Okay, a couple hours and less than a pint of blood later, got a little roof. So real simple, I bent the end of this piece up and the end of this piece up, and I bent a cap to fit over it, kind of snug. And I started it from the bottom using the torch and 50/50 grade acid core solder. It's probably 40 years old. I don't even know if you can get that anymore. And I made 2 end plugs. And they're just, I bent the flange in on the back, and they're soldered. And I'm getting ready to cover this sharp edge that I cut with the original edge that I cut off that I didn't use, but it has a nice roll. So I'm cut it so it'll fit on here. And come on, baby, there we go. So that'll make that edge pretty, and this edge, I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it except maybe just sand it so it's not sharp, and maybe around this corner, and then it's ready to go onto the box.
Getting the solder to stick turned out to be surprisingly easy. Making the solder joints pretty probably takes several years of practice, which I don't have, but the thing is all soldered up and it's pretty darn strong, pretty secure.
So I didn't have a long skinny piece of glass. I didn't really want to buy one, but I had tons of these old window pane glasses, and I still do. So I cut them to put 3 pieces in at the joint. Instead of trying to put a wood mullion, I just dropped a piece of lead. This is for lead for stained glass. My wife does, so easy schmeezy. So now I'll need to drop the bottom piece in place, and oops, I'm gonna take 2 hands. Picked this up on the side of the road this morning on my jog, and I think it's going to solve a problem for me.
A few cuts on the table saw and some sanding and some spray paint, and I have a bottom shelf cover that will keep the books out of any kind of moisture that finds its way past the windows and drips onto that bottom shelf. I've been kind of thinking about this for a while, and this just works out perfect.
One of the finishing touches here, I have this nice old latch, but I don't have a strike plate for it, so I picked up a piece of bronze at the foundry and brought it over here, and I'm going to cut it. Cut the end square and cut this to be for the latch to go in. I think it's going to work just fine. Glued a strip of wood under the plywood around the perimeter, mainly so I'd have some real wood to put the screws through the copper that would hold better than screwing into the edge of the plywood, and just kind of stiffen it up a little bit. Did it yesterday so I can take the clamps off this morning. The door is hung, and the latch is installed, and the little strike I made works pretty good. Yesterday I caulked the back of the glass with some clear latex caulk because it was kind of rattly, and today I think I'm going to go ahead and caulk the front also, just to make sure it's secure and doesn't leak. I don't know what I'm going to do with the weather stripping yet. Probably need something. I bought this foam stuff from Home Depot yesterday, and as soon as I bought it I knew it was a mistake. It doesn't stick. I hate this stuff. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do. I may not need to do anything. I think I'll take it outside and put the water hose on it after the caulk is all sealed up and see how bad it leaks in a blowing rainstorm. And just a drizzle, it won't leak at all. But we get some pretty ferocious summertime thunderstorms with some hard winds, so we'll have to check on the weather stripping. So I cut out a little board that fit above the doors and coated it with clay, and then my wife's steady fingers carved out some letters. Hopefully this spells in French "Little Free Library." And then I pulled a rubber mold off of that, and this morning I cast a hydrostone, which is not going to last forever in the weather, but I intend to cast a bronze and replace it. So we're going to put this on there for now. This is a little quickie. It'll take me a couple of weeks to cast a bronze.
I wanted to mount the library off of the tree. The thought of putting a post hole in the ground with all the roots that are right there was a little daunting. There's also a gas line and a sewer line and a water line very close to where I wanted the library. So I'm making up a bracket to bolt to the tree with some scrap steel, which is the only kind of steel I have. So I cut out a plate to bolt to the tree and a heavier square tube to cantilever out, and 2 square tubes to go on top of the heavy square tube that the box will sit on. And then I plugged all the ends to keep the paper wasps out, because they love a hollow spot to get in there and build their little nests. So all the tubes are filled solid, drilled holes, 1/4-inch bolts going up through these square tubes to hold the library in place, and 1/2-inch holes for the plate. And I took some 1/2-inch lag screws and welded them to short pieces of 1/2-inch all thread, just enough all thread to get 2 nuts and a little adjustment. So when we got to the tree, I put 1 bolt in and bolted the bracket, and this would have been better if I'd have made a bigger plate where I could have drilled through the plate in place into the tree, but my plate was too small and the drill wouldn't fit, so I made it hard on myself. And additionally, if I would have cut the heads off of the lag screws before I welded the all thread on, it would have been real easy because then I could have drilled straight through the plate and put the bolt in without taking the bracket off. But anyway, it worked. I got 4 sizable lag screws in the tree, a little bit past the soft bark layer, so it's very secure. I got it all leveled up and got it painted, and the little library is secure and should never have problems with it moving.
Okay, the little free library is complete and mounted. The copper roof is screwed down. Put this bracket against the tree, and I screwed the lag portion of the bolts all the way in, and then that gave me some threaded rod sticking out where I could adjust the lean a little bit, although it was leaning some to the side, and I had to put the shim under one end to get it straight. But it's good now. We've already had 2 different neighbors bring us books, so hopefully people will use it. Later.